Troy had fallen. The great city was nothing but ash and ghosts. The Greeks, laden with gold and slaves, set their sails for home, believing the war was over. But winning the war does not mean you have survived it. Among the victors was Odysseus, the king of Ithaca. He was the man whose wooden horse had won the day. He was the smartest man in Greece. But he was about to make a fatal mistake. He forgot that the gods demand humility, not pride. In the chaos of the victory, the Greek soldiers had desecrated the temples of Athena and Poseidon. The gods were offended. They turned the winds against the fleet. While other heroes died in storms or were murdered upon their return, Odysseus was destined for a different fate. He would not die, he would suffer. He was condemned to wander the seas for 10 long years, facing monsters that defied logic, stripped of his ships, his men, and his pride, until he learned what it truly means to be a man.
The journey began with a test of the mind. A storm blew Odysseus's fleet off the map to the land of the Lotus Eaters. The natives there were not violent. They simply offered the crew a flower to eat, the lotus. It tasted like honey, but it was a drug. As soon as the men ate it, they forgot everything. They forgot their wives. They forgot their children. They forgot Ithaca. All they wanted was to stay on the beach, eating the flower, drifting in a blissful, drug-induced haze forever. Odysseus saw the danger. This was a death of the soul. He dragged his weeping men back to the ships by force, tying them to the rowing benches as they screamed to be let go. He learned his first lesson. Sometimes paradise is just a trap.
But the physical dangers were far worse. Seeking supplies, Odysseus and 12 of his best men landed on an island inhabited by the Cyclopes, giant, one-eyed shepherds, sons of Poseidon. They found a massive cave filled with cheese and sheep. They feasted, waiting for the owner to return, hoping for hospitality. The owner was Polyphemus, a giant as big as a mountain. When he returned, he didn't offer them wine. He rolled a massive boulder across the entrance, trapping them inside. Then he grabbed 2 of the men, bashed their brains out against the rock, and ate them raw. Trapped, Odysseus knew he couldn't kill the monster. If he killed the Cyclops, who would move the boulder? They would die of starvation. He had to outsmart him. Odysseus offered the giant strong wine. As the monster got drunk, he asked the hero's name. "My name is Nobody." When Polyphemus passed out, Odysseus took a giant olive stake, hardened it in the fire, and drove it into the Cyclops' single eye. The monster screamed. He shouted to his brothers outside, "Help! Nobody is hurting me! Nobody is killing me!" His brothers, hearing this, laughed and walked away. "If nobody is hurting you, then go to sleep." The next morning, blinded and raging, Polyphemus opened the cave to let his sheep out, feeling the tops of their wool to make sure the men weren't escaping. But Odysseus and his men were clinging to the bellies of the sheep. They rode the animals to freedom. They made it to the ship. They were safe. But here, Odysseus's pride, his hubris, took over. As they sailed away, Odysseus shouted back, "Cyclops, if anyone asks who blinded you, tell them it was Odysseus, the king of Ithaca." He wanted the glory, but he gave the monster a name to curse. Polyphemus raised his hands to the sea and prayed to his father, "Father Poseidon, if I am your son, grant that Odysseus never reaches home, Or if he does, let him arrive late, broken and alone." Poseidon heard the prayer. The ocean turned against them. The real nightmare had begun.
The curse followed them. They faced the Lystragonians, giant cannibals who sank 11 of Odysseus's 12 ships. Only one ship remained, one ship full of terrified, grieving men. They washed up on the island of Aeaea, home of the witch goddess Circe. Circe was beautiful, but dangerous. She invited the scouting party to a feast, but her food was laced with magic. With a wave of her wand, she turned the men into pigs, swine, grunting, squealing animals with the minds of humans trapped inside. Odysseus went to save them. On the way, the god Hermes appeared and gave him a holy herb called moly to protect him from her magic. When Circe tried to turn Odysseus into a pig, the spell failed. Odysseus drew his sword and threatened to kill her. Impressed by his immunity and his strength, Circe surrendered. She turned the men back into humans. For a year, Odysseus and his crew lived in luxury with the witch, but the men grew restless. They wanted to go home. Circe agreed to let them go, but she told Odysseus he had to make one final stop to ask for directions. He had to go to the Underworld.
The final road home. To find the way home, Odysseus had to seek the advice of the blind prophet Tiresias, who was dead. Odysseus sailed to the edge of the world, where the sun never shines. He dug a trench and filled it with blood to attract the spirits. The ghosts came swarming up, pale, whispering shadows. Odysseus saw his mother. He didn't even know she had died. She told him she had died of a broken heart, waiting for him to return. Odysseus wept, trying to hug her, but his arms passed through her smoke-like form. Then came Tiresias. The prophet drank the blood and spoke, "Your journey will be hard. Poseidon hates you, but you can make it home if you do one thing. Do not eat the cattle of the sun god." It seemed like a simple rule, but hunger makes men do terrible things. Returning to the sea, they had to pass through a narrow strait. On one side was Charybdis, a whirlpool monster that swallowed the ocean and spat it out, destroying anything in its path. On the other side was Scylla, a six-headed hydra living in the cliffs. Odysseus had to make a choice. If he went near Charybdis, he lost the whole ship. If he went near Scylla, she would eat 6 men, 1 for each head, but the rest would survive. A leader must make the hard calls. Odysseus chose Scylla. He didn't tell the crew. He steered them toward the cliffs. Suddenly, 6 massive necks shot down from the rocks. 6 of his best friends were snatched, screaming into the air. Odysseus watched them dangle, calling his name for the last time as they were devoured. He did not stop. He rode past. It was the price of survival. Broken and exhausted, they landed on the island of Thrinacia. This was the home of the sacred cows of Helios, the sun god. Odysseus warned them, "Do not touch the cows." But a storm trapped them on the island for a month. The food ran out. The men were starving. While Odysseus went inland to pray to the gods, the crew rebelled. They slaughtered the best cows and roasted the meat. The meat mooed on the spit. The dead skins crawled.
It was a cursed feast. When they finally set sail, the sky turned black. Zeus, keeping his promise to the sun god, sent a single precise lightning bolt. It struck the ship. The vessel exploded. The crew, every single man who had eaten the meat, drowned. Only Odysseus survived. He clung to a piece of driftwood, drifting alone in the vast, empty ocean. The king without a kingdom, the captain without a crew. He washed up on the island of Ogygia, home of the nymph Calypso. She fell in love with him. She offered him immortality. She offered him eternal youth if he would just stay and be her husband. For 7 years Odysseus stayed, but it was a prison of paradise. By day he sat on the rocky shore, staring at the horizon, weeping for his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus. By night he slept with the goddess, but his heart was in Ithaca. Finally, Zeus decided the punishment was enough. He sent Hermes to order Calypso to let him go. She was furious, but she obeyed. Odysseus built a raft. He set sail one last time. Poseidon saw him and sent one final storm to smash the raft, but with the help of a sea goddess, Odysseus washed up on the shores of Phaeacia. The Phaeacians, a race of master sailors, heard his sad story. Moved by his suffering, they gave him a magical ship that sailed without pilots. Odysseus fell into a deep sleep. When he woke, he was lying on the sand. The air smelled familiar. The trees looked familiar. He was home. Ithaca was not safe. For 20 years Odysseus had been gone. Everyone assumed he was dead. His palace was overrun by 108 suitors, greedy, arrogant noblemen who wanted to marry Queen Penelope and seize the throne. They ate Odysseus's food, drank his wine, and insulted his son. Athena disguised Odysseus as an old, filthy beggar. She told him, "Test them, see who is loyal." Odysseus walked into his own home. No one recognized him, not his servants, not his son. Only one creature knew him, Argos, his old hunting dog, now blind and infested with fleas, lying on a pile of manure. The dog heard his master's voice, wagged his tail once, and died. He had waited 20 years just to say goodbye. Odysseus endured the insults of the suitors. He watched them abuse his wife. Penelope, faithful to the end, had tricked them for years, weaving a burial shroud by day and unpicking it by night, saying she would marry when it was finished. But time had run out. Penelope announced a contest. "I will marry the man who can string the bow of Odysseus and shoot an arrow through the handles of 12 axes." The day of the contest arrived. The suitors tried one by one. They couldn't even bend the heavy bow, let alone string it. It was a weapon meant for a hero, not these soft politicians. Then the beggar stepped forward. "Let me try," he whispered. The suitors laughed, but Telemachus, who now knew the secret, handed the bow to his father. Odysseus inspected the wood. He bent it effortlessly. He strung it. The strings sang like a swallow. He picked up an arrow, took aim, and fired. The arrow flew straight through the 12 axes. Perfect. Thunder rumbled overhead. Zeus was signaling the end. Odysseus ripped off his rags. He stood revealed in his glory. The king returned. He looked at Antinous, the leader of the suitors.
"The game is over," Odysseus said. He fired. The arrow went through Antinous' throat. What followed was not a battle, it was a slaughter. Odysseus, Telemachus, and 2 loyal servants locked the doors. They killed every single suitor. The floor ran red with blood. The maids who had betrayed the queen were hanged. It was brutal, it was savage, but it was justice in the ancient world. The palace was quiet. Odysseus ordered the bodies cleared and the room purified with fire and sulfur. He went upstairs. Penelope was waiting. She couldn't believe it was him. She thought it was a trick of the gods. She tested him one last time. "Nurse," she said, "move the bed out of the room for him." "Woman," Odysseus snapped, "you cannot move that bed. I built it myself around the roots of a living olive tree. It is rooted to the earth." That was the secret only they knew. Penelope broke down. She ran to him. After 20 years of war, monsters and gods, the king and queen held each other. Odysseus had returned. The circle was closed. The age of heroes eventually faded. The gods withdrew to Olympus, becoming myths and memories. But the story of Odysseus, the man who used his mind to defeat the brute force of the world, remains. It teaches us that no matter how far you go, no matter how many monsters you face, the most important journey is the one that leads you home.
While Odysseus was fighting his way home across the ocean, another hero was fleeing in the opposite direction. His name was Aeneas. He was a Trojan prince, the son of the goddess Aphrodite and a mortal man, Anchises. On the night the wooden horse opened its belly and the Greeks set fire to Troy, Aeneas fought bravely. But the gods appeared to him with a grim message. "Troy is dead. Do not die with it. Take your people and find a new home." The image of Aeneas escaping the burning city is one of the most powerful symbols in mythology. On his back, he carried his elderly, crippled father, Anchises, representing the burden of the past. Holding his hand was his young son, Aeneas, representing the hope of the future. He fought his way through the flames, leading a small band of refugees to the ships. They sailed away, watching their beloved city turn to ash on the horizon. They were no longer Trojans, they were exiles. But Aeneas was different from Odysseus. Odysseus wanted to go back to the past, to his old life. Aeneas was forced to go forward, to a future he did not understand. A prophecy told him he must sail west to a land called Hesperia, that is, Italy, where he would found a new Troy, an empire that would rule the world forever. But escaping the Greeks was only the first problem. Aeneas had a divine enemy. Hera, known to the Romans as Juno, hated the Trojans. She hated them because Paris had not given her the golden apple. She hated them because she knew a prophecy. Fierce descendants of Troy would one day destroy her favorite city, Carthage. So, Juno went to the king of the winds and unleashed a hurricane upon Aeneas's fleet. The ships were tossed like toys, planks shattered, men drowned. Aeneas, looking up at the black sky, shouted, "3 times and 4 times blessed were those who died on the plains of Troy. Why did I not die there?" But Neptune,
Poseidon, seeing the storm invading his domain without permission, calmed the waves. The battered fleet washed up on the shores of North Africa. They were alive, but they were lost, and they had landed in the territory of a rising queen who would become the greatest tragic love of Aeneas's life.
The land was Carthage. Its ruler was Queen Dido, a woman who, like Aeneas, was an exile. She had fled her home in Phoenicia after her brother murdered her husband. She was building a magnificent city in the desert. When Aeneas arrived, Juno and Venus, Aphrodite, conspired together. Juno wanted Aeneas to stay in Carthage so he would never reach Italy and found Rome. Venus just wanted her son to be safe and loved. They sent Cupid to shoot Dido with an arrow of obsession. That night, at a royal banquet, Dido asked Aeneas to tell his story. As he spoke of the wooden horse and the flames of Troy, Dido fell madly in love with him. She saw in him a kindred spirit, a survivor, a leader, a broken soul. For a year they lived together. Aeneas helped build the walls of Carthage. He forgot his prophecy. He forgot Italy. He was happy. He acted as Dido's husband, and for the first time since the war, he felt peace. But the king of gods, Jupiter, Zeus, was watching. Rome had to be built. History could not be stopped for a romance. He sent Mercury, Hermes, to Aeneas with a cold, hard message. "What are you doing here? Building a city for a woman? Think of your son. Think of his destiny. Sail to Italy, now." Aeneas was devastated. He loved Dido, but Aeneas was a man of pietas, duty. To him, the command of the gods was absolute. He quietly prepared the ships. When Dido found out, she screamed, weeping, begging him to stay. Aeneas looked at her with a stone face, hiding his own breaking heart, and said the cruelest line in mythology, "I do not sail for Italy by my own will." He left. Dido, watching his sails disappear over the horizon, built a massive funeral pyre. She climbed atop it, cursed Aeneas, and stabbed herself with his sword. "Let there be no love, no treaty between our peoples," she gasped as she died. "Let my avenger rise from my bones." Her curse came true. Centuries later, her avenger would arise, Hannibal Barca, the general of Carthage, who would nearly destroy Rome in the Punic Wars. The rivalry between Rome and Carthage began with a broken heart. Aeneas bore on heavy with guilt. He landed at Cumae in Italy, seeking the Sibyl, a prophetess of Apollo. He needed to know if his journey was worth the cost. The Sibyl told him he must descend into the underworld to speak to the ghost of his father, Anchises, who had died during the journey. Unlike Odysseus, who merely stood at the entrance, Aeneas walked physically into the land of the dead. He passed the river Styx. He passed the three-headed dog Cerberus, drugged by the Sibyl. He walked through the fields of mourning. There, in the shadows, he saw Dido. Aeneas wept. "Was I the cause of your death? I swear by the stars I left your shore unwillingly." Dido said nothing. She turned her back on him and walked away into the darkness, reuniting with the ghost of her first husband. Aeneas was denied forgiveness. Finally, he reached Elysium, the paradise of the blessed. He found his father, Anchises. The old man smiled.
He took Aeneas to a hill overlooking the river Lethe, where souls were waiting to be reborn. Anchises pointed to the line of future souls, men who had not yet been born, but who would spring from Aeneas's bloodline. "Look," Anchises said, "there is Romulus, who will found the city. There is Julius Caesar, who will touch the skies. And there is Augustus, who will bring the Golden Age." Aeneas saw the glory of Rome. He saw the legions, the laws, the empire that would civilize the world. He realized that his suffering had a purpose. He wasn't just saving refugees. He was planting the seed of the greatest civilization on Earth.
Aeneas finally arrived in Latium. The local king Latinus welcomed him, recognizing the prophecy that his daughter Lavinia should marry a foreigner to create a powerful dynasty. But Juno was not done. She summoned a fury from hell, Alecto, to poison the hearts of the locals. Alecto went to Turnus, the prince of the Rutuli tribe. Turnus was strong, arrogant, and he had been promised Lavinia's hand in marriage. When he heard a Trojan refugee was stealing his bride, he went mad with rage. War exploded across Italy. It was a mirror of the Trojan War, but this time the Trojans were the invaders. Aeneas, once a man of peace, became a grim general. He forged alliances with Evander, a Greek king living in Italy. Evander gave Aeneas his young son, Pallas, to train in war. The battle was brutal. Turnus, a warrior of immense skill, cornered young Pallas. It was no contest. Turnus drove his spear through the boy's chest. But Turnus made a mistake. He didn't just kill Pallas, he gloated. He ripped the heavy gold belt off the dead boy's body and wore it as a trophy. When Aeneas heard of Pallas's death, the Trojan Hector vanished. He became a whirlwind of slaughter. He cut through the Italian lines, looking for one man. The armies gathered to watch the final confrontation. Aeneas versus Turnus. The destiny of Italy hung on a single sword fight. Turnus was younger and faster, but Aeneas fought with the weight of destiny. His spear flew, piercing Turnus's thigh. The Italian prince fell to his knees. Aeneas stood over him, sword raised. Turnus looked up, humbled. "I have earned this," he whispered. "Use your right, but if you can feel mercy, send my body back to my father." Aeneas hesitated. He was not a butcher. He thought of his own father. He almost lowered his sword. But then his eyes caught a flash of gold on Turnus's shoulder. It was the belt of Pallas, the boy Aeneas had sworn to protect. The memory of the young boy's death flooded back. The mercy in Aeneas's eyes was replaced by cold fury. "You wear the trophy of those I loved?" Aeneas roared. "It is Pallas who strikes you, Pallas who sacrifices you." He drove his sword deep into Turnus's chest. The Italian prince died, his soul fleeing indignantly to the shadows below. The war was over. Aeneas married Lavinia. He founded the city of Lavinium. He did not call his people Trojans anymore. He knew that Troy was a memory of pain. He merged his people with the locals, the Latins. From this union of Trojan resilience and Italian strength, a new race was born. A few centuries later, two descendants of Aeneas, raised by a she-wolf, would found a city on 7 hills, Romulus and Remus. They called the city
Rome. And Rome did exactly what the prophecy foretold. It conquered the world. It adopted the Greek gods. Zeus became Jupiter. Ares became Mars. Aphrodite became Venus, and spread their stories to every corner of Europe, Africa, and Asia. The Greeks may have invented the myths, but it was the Romans, the children of Aeneas, who preserved them. The golden age of gods ended, but the age of empire had just begun. And thus, the story that began with a lightning bolt in the void ends with an eagle flying over the Colosseum. The cycle is complete.